Article 8. Ownership of intellectual property rights, etc. All intellectual property rights, copyrights, and other rights pertaining to all images, videos, texts, programs, and other information, hereinafter referred to as the content, provided by the company to the user within the service belong to the company or to lawful right holders who have licensed the company. The user shall not, without the company's permission, process, adapt, edit, reproduce, republish, sell, transfer the content to third parties, or otherwise engage in any act that infringes upon the intellectual property rights therein. The license to use the content granted by the company to the user is non-exclusive, non-transferable, and non-assignable. The user shall not grant a sub-license to any third party regarding the content. The user shall not apply for registration, request transfer, or otherwise exercise any rights with respect to the intellectual property rights in the content. Article 9. Acquisition and use of information. When the user uses the service, the company may acquire personal information as defined in Article 2, Paragraph 1 of the Act on the Protection of Personal Information, and information necessary for payment processing and transaction performance, such as transaction IDs, payment date/time, payment amount, payment status, etc., notified by the payment service provider. If the acquired data constitutes personal information, the company shall handle it appropriately in accordance with the company's privacy policy, published on the company's official website. Article 10. Disclaimer. The company makes no warranties regarding the continued existence, content, or method of provision of the service. The company provides the service as is and makes no warranties regarding any of the following matters. The user shall use the service at their own discretion and responsibility. 1. The absence of bugs, defects, or security vulnerabilities, and the completeness or reliability of the service. 2. The non-infringement of the service upon any intellectual property rights or any rights of third parties. 3. The non-loss of information and save information sent or received through the service, and the completeness of data storage. 4. The suitability, reliability, usefulness, fitness for a particular purpose, or compatibility with the user's environment of the service, or the accuracy, completeness, or usefulness of information obtained or acquired by the user through the service. Any dispute arising between the user and any third party, including other users, in connection with the use of the services shall be resolved by the user at their own cost and responsibility. If the contract between the company and the user under these terms constitutes a consumer contract under the Consumer Contract Act, provisions hereof that fully disclaim the company's liability shall not apply. Furthermore, if the contract of use constitutes a consumer contract and the company has acted with willful misconduct or gross negligence, provisions hereof that partially disclaim the company's liability shall not apply. Article 11. Restriction on use of accounts, etc. If the user falls under any of the following circumstances, the company may, without prior notice to the user, void any issued in-game currency, restrict or suspend the user's use of the service, delete the user's account, or take any other necessary measures. Furthermore, the company shall have no obligation to disclose the reasons for taking such measures. 1. If the company determines that the user has violated or is likely to violate these terms, 2. If the user violates any other contract with the company, apart from those related to the service. 3. If it is found that the user has previously had an account restricted, suspended, or deleted by the company. 4. If the user applies for account deletion. 5. If the user delays payment of fees, or if the company is notified of a payment cancellation, including a chargeback by the payment service provider. 6. If it is found that the user is a member of an organized crime group or has any association with an organized crime group, its members, or persons closely related thereto. Or 7. In any other cases where the company deems the user unsuitable as a user of the service. Article 12. Modification, suspension, and termination of the service. The contents of the service, in whole or in part, may be modified by the company without prior notice to the user. The company may terminate the provision of all or part of the service for its own convenience by providing prior notice. In the case of full termination, a notice period of 60 days shall be required. Article 13. Interruption of service provision. Under any of the following circumstances, the company may interrupt the provision of the service, either temporarily or for an extended period, without prior notice to the user. 1. If the continuation of the service becomes impossible due to force majeure events such as large-scale earthquakes, tsunamis, or other natural disasters, fires, power outages, or other unforeseen accidents, war, riots, civil unrest, or labor disputes. 2. If periodic or emergency maintenance, inspection, or construction work is being performed on systems, etc., necessary for providing the service. 3. If the service cannot be continued due to network congestion or failures of internet service providers, etc. 4. If the service cannot be provided due to measures taken pursuant to laws or regulations, or 5. In any other cases where the company deems it necessary to interrupt the provision of the service. Article 14. Force majeure. The company shall not be liable for any damage suffered by the user due to computer viruses, natural disasters, accidents, war, riots, civil unrest, enactment or repeal of laws and regulations, orders or dispositions by public authorities, or any other causes not attributable to the company. Article 5. Article 15. Prohibited acts. When using the service, the user shall not engage in any of the following acts, or any act likely to lead to such acts. 1. Acts that violate these terms. 2. Discriminatory, insulting, or offensive acts targeting specific genders, races, sexual orientations, etc. 3. Acts that violate international law, the Constitution, laws, ordinances, or other regulations. 4. Acts of impersonating the company or any person related to the company. 5. Acts of providing false information or providing or disseminating information contrary to facts to the company or third parties through the service. 6. Acts of improperly collecting, accumulating, disclosing, or using personal information of persons related to the company or other users. 7. Acts that infringe upon intellectual property rights, personality rights, privacy rights, or other rights of the company or third party. 8. Acts of suicide or self-harm, criminal acts, illegal acts, or acts related to, or acts of soliciting or assisting in such acts. 9. Acts of engaging in for-profit activities using information obtained through the service. 10. acts of buying, selling, or exchanging accounts, items, paid items, etc., or game data for cash or similar consideration through methods other than those designated by the company, whether inside or outside the service. 11. Any act of reaching an agreement or making preparation for transactions described in the preceding subparagraph, whether inside or outside the service. 12. Improper acts concerning payment for the service. 13. Acts of improperly manipulating results obtained through use of the service, whether individually, in collusion with other users, or by utilizing the actions of other users. 14. Acts that interfere with communication or place a significant load on the servers or networks operating the service. 15. Acts of impersonating another user through unauthorized access or use of another user's password. 16. Acts of intentionally providing or disclosing information about defects in the service to third parties other than the company. 17. Acts of modifying or using programs that interfere with the provision of the service, including the use of bots, cheat tools, etc. 18. Acts that hinder the normal provision of the service or that damage the reputation of the company or the service. 19. Acts that assist or induce any of the acts listed above, or 20. Any other acts that the company deems inappropriate. If the user engages in any act listed in the preceding paragraph, the company may immediately suspend the user's account without prior notice. Article 16. Damages. If the user violates any provision of these terms or causes damage to the company due to reasons attributable to the user shall compensate the company for such damage, including reasonable attorney's fees. If the user suffers damage due to reasons attributable to the company shall compensate the user for such damage. However, except in cases of willful misconduct or gross negligence on the part of the company's liability for compensation to the user shall be limited to the amount paid by the user in the month in which such damage occurred, and shall be further limited to direct and actual damage arising from the use of the service, regardless of whether the company could have foreseen such damage. The company shall not be liable for damage arising from special circumstance, expected lost profits, indirect damage, or any other damage. Article 17. Prohibition of assignment of rights and obligations. The user shall not assign, transfer, change the name of, or provide as collateral, in whole or in part, their status as a user or any other rights and obligations in transactions between the company and the user under these terms to any third party. If the company transfers the business pertaining to the service to another company, the company may, as part of such business transfer, assign to the transferee the rights and obligations under the contract based on these terms between the company and the user, as well as information necessary for providing the service. The user hereby agrees in advance to such assignment. The term business transfer in this paragraph includes not only ordinary business transfers, but also corporate splits and all other cases in which the business is transferred.